1. This happened around 4 months ago. I watch a lot of true crime. Looking back now, it creeps me out to think of what could have happened if I hadn't acted how I did. Yeah, sure, I could still be paranoid, but something in my gut says I'm not. I get to my back gate from a small path at the start of a creek just off a main road. You can go the longer way around to get to my front door, but usually I just take the back gate because it's quicker. The creek is on the left side of the path, surrounded by trees. The local council has a problem with how many bats live there. The right side of the path is the backs of the houses. Some have gates like mine. If you follow the main road for a bit, there's an underpass that is always covered with graffiti. It always gets painted over only for more graffiti to appear, and the cycle continues. I was hanging out with a friend. We went on a bike ride and had a picnic before school would start back up again. It had gotten pretty dark by the time I was heading back. I went through the underpass, which in itself is a sketchy thing to do at night, especially considering I'm a 16-year-old 5'4" female. I got onto the main road and started riding in a bicycle lane, and noticed all the bats in the sky. It was rather pretty, actually. I also noticed 2 cars by the curb on the other side of the road with their lights on. One of the cars was black and had tinted windows, and the other was a bigger 4-wheel drive car, also black with tinted windows that had a mattress tied to the roof. I just assumed someone was having a party or whatever and kept biking. I heard cars behind me, but that's not unusual considering it's a main road, even if it does get pretty quiet at night. They slowed down so they were driving behind me, which was odd. I was guessing it was just because they didn't want to hit me. I mean, no one was on the other side of the road. I was in the bicycle lane. They could have overtaken me if they had wanted to. I found myself biking even faster because I felt bad I was the reason they were driving so slow. As I was thinking this, a car overtook me, but it didn't speed off or anything. It remained driving at my speed just in front of me. It was then I noticed there had been a car behind that car, that it was also driving at my speed just behind me. Needless to say, I felt pretty creeped out being sandwiched between these 2 cars when I realized they were the same ones that were parked on the other side of the road earlier. The fact they were pretty much the exact sort of car you'd think of when you think of a creepy car didn't help either. I kept biking till I got back to the path by the creek I usually take to get back to my gate. I was having second thoughts, though. It was dark. Not many people take that path, and it was surrounded by trees. Not to mention how creeped out I felt by what was happening with these cars. I thought it would be best if I turned down the path because these cars would probably just keep driving. But the second I thought that, the 4-wheel drive in front of me indicated to go into the curb just in front of the path. No, not happening. No way was I going down that path now, considering there was no reason someone would pull up there. There wasn't an entrance to anyone's house nearby, or anything except the darkness of the creek. I was going to go the long way around. I overtook the 4-wheel drive that had now pulled onto the curb to continue along the bicycle lane, the long way to my house. As I overtook the 4-wheel drive, it indicated to leave the curb. They hadn't even been there 10 seconds. They pulled out as the car that was still behind me stopped to let them out. The 4-wheel drive went back to sandwiching me with the other car. Pretty much any remaining thought I had of this all being a coincidence went out the window. I turned up a path that goes by the main road. When the cars noticed I did this, they too indicated. By this point my heart was beating so fast I came up with a split-second plan. I needed to turn left at the T intersection to get to my house, but I didn't want to risk these cars knowing where I lived. So I continued going straight, pretending I wasn't going to turn. They continued also. When it was no longer possible for them to take a left, I did a quick turn and sped down my street. I heard both of the cars speed off as well. I don't think I've ever biked faster in my life. I flung open the gate, and as I closed it behind me and my bike, I heard speeding cars approaching my street from the left. I panicked and ducked down, peering through the gap in my fence. I had a sinking feeling I knew what cars would come past. Sure enough, the black 4-wheel drive and other black cars sped past. So whoever was driving those cars late at night, whatever it was you wanted, let's never meet again. 2. I'm female and I'm 27. At the time of this story, I was 19. I was living in Littleton, which is a suburb of Denver. I lived and worked within the same block, working at a hair salon, and lived in an apartment across the street behind the salon. I lived with 4 other people in a studio apartment. Yes, it was chaos, but I was young and dumb, and worked so much I was only there to sleep. While working at the salon, I met people in all walks of life. Most were nice and hard-working like me. In the plaza where the salon was, there happened to be an abundance of loiterers, homeless drunks mostly. There was a particular man who I saw often. He was an older gentleman. He always smelled like booze and was nice enough. Quite the flirt, though, which was uncomfortable for 19-year-old me. On several occasions he asked me to come hang out and drink with him. I always refused, telling him of my boyfriend. For the life of me, I cannot remember his name. For the sake of the story, I'll call him Mark. One afternoon, after getting off work around 4, I started to meander my way across the parking lot to the coffee shop. I ordered my drink and took it outside to sit and enjoy in the sunny weather. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mark approaching me rapidly, a broad smile across his face, asking me for a lighter. Begrudgingly, I obliged, passing it over. Mark lights his cigarette and returns the lighter to me, as he not so gracefully brushes my arm. A disgusting chill ran up my spine. I pulled away and stood up, saying it was time for me to go. Mark begged me to come drink with him. Again, I refused. After that, I didn't see him for several weeks. It was bliss, since I felt like he was always lurking around the plaza, waiting for some sorry soul to look his way. Then one night, I decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood. I preferred night walks because it wasn't so hot. I went around through downtown Littleton and looped back to my apartment complex. Then, as I was maybe 10 minutes away from home, a figure appeared on the walkway ahead of me. I thought nothing of it at first, since a lot of people were out here and about. But as I got closer, I recognized the person, Mark. He swayed this way and that on the cement, nearly falling into the road. This is where I made my first mistake. I should have crossed the road or turned around. Instead, I decided to walk past him, hoping he wouldn't know who I am in this state. Alas, no dice. Mark got in my way and stopped, smiling that broad smile once again. I sighed, resigned to my fate of having to talk to him. I asked him how he was and if he'd had a good day. He said he did, but that it would be better if he had some drinking company. I said, not I, because I had to work early in the next morning the next day. Unfortunately, he was unbothered and continued to beg, trying the drunk puppy dog eyes on me. I was slightly uneasy, but otherwise unmoved. Laughing awkwardly, I tried to edge my way around him. He held out his arms, blocking my path. With a serious face, I demanded Mark move out of my way so I could return home. For some reason, this flipped a switch within him. Suddenly angry, he grabbed me by the arm, holding it tightly. I winced and tried to shake him off, but Mark wouldn't let go. He took another step towards me and grabbed my other arm. Immediately, I knew it was going to bruise. The pain sent me into fight-or-flight mode. My body picked both. First, I shoved Mark hard into the shrubbery behind him. Then I took off sprinting down the sidewalk. I didn't stop until I burst through the door of my apartment. I dissolved into tears and fell to the floor. Alarmed, my roommates comforted and questioned me. After I pulled my shit together, I told them what Mark did. My boyfriend was furious and stormed out of the room with a bat in his hand and his friend hot on his heels. My other roommates stayed with me. When my boyfriend and his friend returned, they said they couldn't find him, luckily for Mark. We thought of calling the cops, but rejected the idea because we weren't totally on the right side of the law. Pot wasn't legal in CO yet. So instead, I bought pepper spray and started carrying a knife in my person. It did make me feel much safer. I stopped going for walks alone after dark unless my boyfriend went with me. Strangely, I never saw Mark again after that night, though I was completely okay with it. So wherever you may have gone, Mark, just leave me alone. Next time I will poke a hole in you. 3. So I want to start off by saying I still work for this company, and I still have anxiety every time I go into work. The company is huge, one of the biggest names in the world. For privacy purposes, I'm going to call it the Big Cheese or Big C. I also want to mention that I have crippling social anxiety. I credit to being homeschooled most of my life. This will make more sense later. Well, September of last year I was fresh out of high school and looking for work. I needed this job immediately because I was living with my significant other, and we were barely getting by. My father, my grandfather, they both either work or worked for this company for a long period of time, and it is something that garnered a lot of respect in my family. So of course I was thrilled when I got my first interview. It went great, and I was all set to start training, which involved a few classes and on-the-job training. The classes were awkward, to say the least, but nonetheless informative. Well, after the classes, we had our first task: join a group of fellow trainees and tour the work environment. This is when I first met creepy coworker. He was in the very back of my group, seemed a little shy, and didn't really talk to the rest of the group, unless he was trying to make an awkward joke to join in. At first, I kind of just felt bad for him. He seemed harmless, but definitely awkward and out of the loop. Knowing as much as I did going into the company, I made the effort to inform him and keep him updated with what the trainers were asking of us. He just seemed so lost and confused. I thought I was doing a good thing by helping him out, even my significant other thought so at the time. The training went by without any hiccups, and soon we were given the location of where we start out. Ironically enough, the only person that I'd gotten to know, creepy coworker, had the same area I did. Realizing that we start out together and both didn't know anyone, we decided to exchange phone numbers. This was so that we could both meet up the next week, starting day, so we wouldn't get lost. I thought nothing of this when he asked for my number and just assumed it was more because he was nervous and didn't know anyone besides me. Boy, did I live to regret that. The first day of training, we met up at basically a flagpole so that we could wait for our on-the-job trainer, Christy. When he got off the employee shuttle, he started texting me, asking where I was. I was in the smoking section a little ways away, killing my fears with a cigarette. I texted back telling him where I was, and he asked if he could join. I didn't like how nervous I felt, so I wasn't very comfortable with anyone joining me during this time of reprieve. But I saw him coming over anyways, so I scooted over to make room on the bench. This didn't matter, because apparently he was going to sit as close to me as possible anyways. I hate touch, or people being in my personal bubble. Being a victim of other trauma, touch was something only people very close to me have permission to do. Creepy coworker then proceeded to ask me if he could bum a cigarette, and I'm not going to say no, so I gave him one. After he lit up, he handed me my lighter that I didn't even notice he took from the top of my bag back to me. Again, I kind of just ignored unwarranted invasion of my space. We talked since we had about 30 minutes to kill. We talked about the normal stuff like, how do you feel about the company? Where do you want to end up in it? I noticed he was wearing tattoo covering his sleeves, so I asked him about his tattoos. He pulled down the sleeves and started going over almost each and every one. All something to do with either a love interest or something geeky. I listened out of mild curiosity, but quickly got uncomfortable when he started pulling out his phone to show me pictures of ones he drew. I was uncomfortable because he kept showing me pictures of himself as well, mostly photos of him shirtless, and I didn't really find that appropriate. He mentioned he was a Marine, and he had gained too much weight after his last tour. I apologized out of sympathy, but suggested it was nothing to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, after that, he kept smiling at me in a way I deemed to be admiration. I had seen this look from my fiancée, so I knew somewhere I had effed up. I quickly turned the conversation to more appropriate stuff like music taste. He seemed interested in what music I liked a little too much, and decided he should make me a playlist. I said it really wasn't necessary, but he insisted. Later into that very day, during training, he kept purposely doing kind things, like taking heavy boxes from my hands, or taking the odd jobs he deemed too grueling for a lady. I was a little annoyed, but mostly just glad most of the jobs meant that he'd have to go to a different area and give me some space. He'd always find a way back to appear beside me and scare me. I hate being scared, and he laughed it off every time. I was more than uncomfortable at this point, and a nervousness had settled in the pit of my stomach. At the end of the night, after we'd been sent to go home and come back the next day, he decided to walk me out. We'd walk back through the maze my workplace actually is, all the way to the employee costume and center lockers. It was there we had gotten our work costumes and stored our regular clothes in lockers. Well, I was having trouble remembering the combination, and I couldn't find the little slip of paper that told me it. Creepy coworker came up and smirked at me, seemingly waiting for me to finish up. I thought he had left by this point, so I wasn't expecting him to show up. After a few tries, he reached over and put the combination of my lock in for me. This was a serious red flag for me. He had already memorized my combination, and now I felt as though my privacy was completely gone. Again, I'm awkward and unsure of what to do in any situation like this, so I thanked him but suggested he let me figure it out next time. I was hoping he would so he would forget my combination. Remembered this for later. After changing back into my regular clothes in the girls' locker room, I came out and he was still waiting for me. I asked him why he had waited when he could have just gotten home sooner, to which he replied, "Because I am a gentleman and a lady should be walked to her car so she can be kept safe." I told him my significant other was waiting to pick me up. He asked where, and I told him down the street like an idiot. I still don't know why I complied with this creep as much as I did, but I had never been in a situation like this one. He told me that it was too far for me to walk, and that it wasn't safe, so he offered to drive me over to my significant other's car. Due to how tired I was and how much I ached from the day, I just didn't have the strength to argue. I mean, he was creepy but nice. I chalked up the creepiness to him just being awkward. So, without anything else weird happening, he took me to my significant other, whom I had been texting this entire time just to let him know where I was and what was going on. I had a deep gut feeling that I should text him everything I knew about this guy, so I did. When we pulled up, I immediately got out of the car. My boyfriend sat there leaning against the car with his arms crossed. He wasn't very happy about him giving me a ride, but nonetheless thanked the creepy coworker for getting me over to him safely. The coworker nodded, seeming to smirk at my boyfriend the whole time. This was when my boyfriend first got a bad feeling about the guy. So we got home and my boyfriend warned me about the guy, telling me he wasn't getting a good vibe from creepy coworker. It was not even 3 minutes after that I got a text from the coworker. He started sending me songs and memes and telling me things like, "I really feel like you get me." Now, I was deeply concerned. What the hell did I get myself into? Why did I have to be so goddamn nice to people? The following day at work, I was on the last day of training and I had a massive panic attack. I have a chronic illness, and the situation ended with none of my managers listening to me when I told them that the pain doesn't last and comes and goes. They proceeded to rush me to the emergency room. A stretcher carried me through work while I was crying and trying to mind my face. The customers were quick to take out their phones and film the whole thing. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but what happens next is worse. I received about 20 texts from creepy coworker asking me how I was. At this point I was done, I just didn't respond. After a few random memes, he started texting me that he was drunk and thinking about not going home to his wife. This was the first time he'd ever mentioned to me he even had a wife. I was dumbfounded. Why was he so concerned about me when he had someone he obviously loved enough to marry? I didn't respond. I went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to my boyfriend looking at my phone in anger. My heart sank, and I could only imagine what creepy coworker had sent now. My boyfriend showed me the only text I had gotten since the night before. It was from his wife texting me from his phone. She wrote me a message explaining that creepy coworker had a problem getting attached to women. She warned me that I should stay away from him, and then told me her name. My name. It was after that she explained my name was a thing for him. All of his exes had the same name. Now at this point my boyfriend was telling me not to go back to this job, that it wasn't worth it. But that's not me. I wasn't going to let one creep ruin this opportunity for me. This job meant the world to me and I never wanted to let it go. So I told him if he continues that I'd go to HR, but in all honesty, I really didn't want to go to HR. I was a new girl. I didn't want the first month on the job to be me fighting a harassment case. Biting my nails the whole way I went to work. Suddenly, creepy coworker wasn't hovering anymore. I thought this might have been him getting embarrassed. I was pretty convinced I wasn't going to have a problem after that. Big mistake. On my lunch break, he made sure to go on his lunch early and come find me. His normally enthusiastic attitude was gone, replaced by what felt like anger. I was scared. He came up to me and let me know that his wife was full of shit and just angry because he was divorcing her. At this point, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I kept hoping he'd take a hint. Nope. He told me he had a gift for me and that he'd give it to me after the shift, quickly walking away before I could respond. After my shift, I go outside the work area to the lockers. I had waited an extra hour and a half, even taking a closing position from a coworker, just so he'd go home before me. Well, my lock wasn't locked all the way, and now I was freaked out. I opened the locker to grab my bag and go, but I noticed it. A rolled-up piece of drawing paper. I know what kind it was because I myself am an artist. Unrolling it, it was a naked girl. A naked girl that resembled my video game character on World of Warcraft. I briefly mentioned my WoW addiction to my group on the first group training day. I didn't even realize he'd heard any of that, much less memorized the information. Suddenly he walks up, even though he should be long gone by then, and confronts me. He asks me if I like it, and because he seemed angry I said yes. I suggested he didn't do it anymore as my boyfriend wouldn't like this kind of gift at all. He rolled his eyes and playfully giggled at me like I was joking with him. I wasn't. Not only did he follow me the whole way out of the work grounds, he got on the employee shuttle that I got on to have witnesses. He sat right next to me, leaning on me. I felt like a deer in the headlights, mentally begging someone to suggest that he shouldn't be that close to me. No one paid any attention. Instead, I spent the whole drive trying to get this man to pull his arm off my shoulders. I felt nauseated and my head was spinning. After we got off, I practically dashed off the bus and ran to my boyfriend. He parked the car at the entrance to the employee parking zone. I got in the car and told him to go. He took off and I started crying. I told my boyfriend and he was pissed. He wanted to turn around and punch creepy coworker. But I talked him out of it, through tears. I promised that I'd talk to my managers after that. Well, I kept looking for the right time to pull the manager aside, but never got a chance the next night I went in. Now, creepy coworker's attitude did another 180. He was being extremely, weirdly playful. Then he crossed the final line. He grabbed my butt where customers could easily see him. My coworkers kind of laughed and thought it was a game. Because this time I was pissed and pushed to my limit, I went after him. I legitimately punched him in the ass and shouted in his face, "How do you like that, huh?" Seething. He seemed unfazed by my anger. Instead, he laughed it off and winked at me. I went down into the basement for the employee bathroom and quickly threw up the contents of my stomach. I cried in the stall, praying to God that this would stop. I quickly made an excuse, used my chronic illness, and went home. So fast forward a few weeks. He had completely swapped out his shift so he wouldn't work with me. I felt like I had won the battle. I sent a message, and he realized he'd crossed boundaries. Until the night before Christmas Eve. I had a terrible feeling as my boyfriend was driving me to work that night. I felt gross. I got to work and he was there, flirting with the other girls. Suddenly, having this big ego I had never seen him display before. Like I said, when I met him, he was shy and awkward. It's like his personality flipped every time I had to see him. I never knew which side of CC I was going to get. That night, he actually stomped off as all the other coworkers, including myself, closed the joint. We were scrubbing like normal, and he didn't seem altogether. So he clocked out early, and I relaxed. I figured he had gotten in trouble since one of our managers seemed to be upset that he clocked out without permission. I was there extra late. The evening festivities were done with for the night. My zone was pretty much closed off from the customers. So I walked through the massive property that is my work to get to the street. I had started taking new ways to meet my boyfriend who picked me up just so I couldn't be followed. This time I was going to walk straight out of the grounds and onto the street where the bus stops, where my boyfriend would be waiting at the curb. I was about halfway through my approximately 12-minute walk, and I was in a dark area. Out of nowhere, as I'm sure you've already guessed, creepy coworker shows up. He starts yelling my name and following me from behind. I pretend not to notice and walk faster. He yells my name again and seems angrier. So I sprint for it. I sprint all the way across the shuttle zone and end up crashing into someone's chest. Thank God it was actually my boyfriend who had a really bad feeling and wanted to be as close to my work exit as possible. I look back and creepy coworker got on his shuttle but was staring from the window, smiling like a Cheshire cat the whole time. Never in my life had I been so terrified. After that, the next night was Christmas Eve and I was supposed to work, but I just knew if I went in something bad was going to happen to me. So crying the whole time because I knew I had earned a bunch of points for calling out to avoid him. I cried asking the lady on the phone if I was going to get fired, and she said she honestly couldn't say. I respected that, but knew I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let this fucking creep make me lose a job I had worked so hard to get, even changing my appearance to fit their strict standards. No. So I wrote to the only person I could think of, my trainer Christy. She was a lead, and she is the kindest girl you'd ever meet, heart of gold. You just knew being her friend meant you'd have a trusted confidant for life. I told her everything. I sent her the screenshots of the text sent to me. I finally told someone with an ounce of leadership that I was scared to go to work. Immediately she responded and asked if she could tell the managers, and even though I was incredibly nervous, I told her yes. The next day I was pulled in, and God bless my ex-manager Christopher, because he was shocked at everything that happened to me and quickly helped me write a report for HR. He led me through the steps, and even changed the schedule so I wouldn't work with creepy coworker unless he specifically traded shifts. 2 months go by. I am well acquainted with the responsibilities for my work at this point, and I'm comfortable. But of course there's no stopping a stalker. He had traded a shift and was working the night shift with me. He was angry every time he looked at me, and I avoided him at all costs. Then around halfway through my shift, I'm down in the basement, coming back from the restroom. I'm walking up the steps that lead back to my work area, and then I feel someone behind me. Before I could think clear thought, I was pushed against the wall, hand beside my head. He leans in and says, "You should smile more." Then the bastard chuckles and walks away. I feel pretty hysterical at this point and run to the closest lead, crying and try to explain what happened. It was at that point my manager Christopher, pissed off that HR was taking so long to investigate my case, went to them to speed it up. Well, after 4 months of interview processes with HR, finally the case was resolved, and not only was he let go, but I was doing really well in my job finally. Nothing to worry me into not paying attention to my duties. Creepy coworker has left me alone ever since, but sometimes I get random friend requests from guys with no pictures, and always similar names, always close to his name. Creepy coworker, leave me alone or you won't like the results. I won't be intimidated ever again, and I will win every battle you throw at me. Let's not meet ever again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories. Episode 527. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. When does this go up? I'm losing track of time. It goes up on Wednesday the 30th. Okay. Right, so... I remember my Walking Dead game comes out today, so... Hopefully, we'll see how I'm feeling. If I can get work done early enough, I'll be able to try that game out. That'll be fun. I'm not going to ramble on about that too much. I will certainly let you guys know whether or not it was any good, though. This is the one based... I believe this one's based on the TV show, though. I did kind of bow out of the TV show quite a few years back. Actually, around about the same time... in terms of story and character that I stopped reading the comic, actually. That was a little bit before that. Okay, anyway, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.